What's up, guys? I'm Drew Carroll with Seek One, and today I'm going to be talking about 3 of my favorite buck stories. So the reason that I picked these 3, and they're not my biggest bucks, these 2 are probably my number 2 and 3, but these 3 kind of represent like what I would call, I guess, the journey of a hunter, or like the story arc of a hunter, at least for me. If you guys watch Seek One, you kind of know that we're known for hunting urban areas, door knocking, getting permission. And this buck right here, I killed back in 2010. His name is King. And this was actually my very first bow kill, first compound bow kill. Very first spot that we ever landed in Atlanta. It was a 6-acre piece of property. We had actually been hunting it for a couple years, kind of trying to figure out how to hunt, honestly. Like this in the progression of hunting, this was like us trying stuff, really didn't have a mentor. We're just kind of trying new things, trying to figure out the gear, trying to figure out how to hang stands, how to access the property. And there was a lot of trial and error for like 2 years of that at this piece of property. The property was loaded. Lee and I have always said, like, if we were to go back to Atlanta and pick one piece of property like 15 years ago that we'd want to hunt, it's still that piece. But like I said, we were new into hunting, brand new into bow hunting, and just trying to figure it out. So this deer we actually had on camera, I believe the first year that we ever got that spot. And I think he was probably 5.5 years old. That would have been 2008. And maybe 150-inch deer. And to us, that was a giant deer back then, because I was used to growing up hunting a farm. My parents leased property out in East Georgia. Big deer was like 120 inches. So we were not used to seeing deer like this. And trail cameras were just kind of starting to be a thing. We had like the big mole trees, had a couple of them, put them out half the time, they don't work. But we were able to get a few pictures of this deer in 2008 and never really like put the puzzle pieces together. Again, we're totally new into bow hunting, trying to figure it out. And season ends. Actually, crazy thing about this spot. So Jay Maxwell, who was part of Seek One for a while, he killed the state record, the Georgia non-typical bow record, which scored 200, I think it grossed 220-something inches, less than 500 yards from where we were hunting this deer. And we didn't know it at the time. We sort of knew who Jay was, but we weren't like great friends with him like we are now. So fast forward, 2008 season ends, 2009 season comes around. We're excited to see what this buck turns into. And we literally do not see the deer the entire season. Whole season goes by, we're running cameras. Again, we still just have this one spot, so we're not covering a large swath of land. Don't see the deer the entire time, so we just assume, I guess he's dead, like maybe got hit by a car, I don't know. We knew there were some other people hunting around, so we figured he was just gone. Going into the 2010 season, again, put out cameras, had a couple other really nice target bucks that Lee and I were both hunting on this property. Didn't have pictures of them again. And then I think we get into, it's like late September, early October. I believe I killed him on October 1st, if I'm remembering correctly. I was in college at the time, and I was just coming back on the weekend to hunt that property, to hunt another buck. I think it was like a 140-inch 8-pointer or something. And get set up in my stand. I'm pulling my bow up, getting my gear all hung up in the tree, and I literally have not even sat down in the stand yet. It's probably 5:30 in the afternoon, and I look down, and there's a sapling at like 45 yards just shaking like crazy back in the brush. I'm like looking, trying to figure out what's going on, and it just keeps doing that for like 5 minutes. I'm like, what is that? And so I finally get my stuff settled, and all of a sudden, this buck just beelines it straight out of the brush, across, like perfectly across my shooting lane at 30 yards. And I just see like a chocolate rack, a bunch of mass. Again, I've never seen a buck this big from the stand, really on the hoof at all. And I'm like, yep, that's a shooter. Don't know what deer that is, but I'm going to shoot it. Didn't even have time to get buck fever or anything. Drew back, shot, double lunged him. And I'm just like, what just happened? Again, this is my first bow buck, so I'm just like, I'm in shock, but it hasn't set in yet. And I remember calling Lee, and saying like, hey man, I just killed a buck at the property. I don't know which one it was. It wasn't the 8-pointer. I think it was like, I mean, it was a pretty solid buck, like 130, 140 inches. And I get down, I actually wait for my dad to come help me drag him out before we go track. Walk up on him, and I'm still like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, that's a stud buck at 145 inches. Awesome. We literally drag him out, take him to the processor, and the processor, or the taxidermist, scores him and tells me what I just killed. He ended up scoring 173 inches, and we weighed him totally field dressed at 275 pounds. So on the hoof, he would have been over 300 pounds. And I was just like totally taken aback, like totally misjudged. I mean, for that to be my first bow buck, and really it was the first buck that we killed at that property, which then led on to like the next property in Atlanta. So to me, this one was the first one of that journey of getting obsessed with bow hunting, obsessed with just finding deer in the suburbs and getting that next spot. And it's crazy how it worked out like that. Like if this wasn't the first buck, if it had taken a few more years to really find success, we could have lost interest a little bit, or just not, it wouldn't have propelled us like it did. So this one's always been special to me. Still one of the biggest body deer that we've ever killed. And if I could go back to that piece of property 10, 15 years ago and know what else was out there, if I knew then what I know now, it would have just been insane who the Steers running buddies were. But that's one of my favorite mounts that I have in my office. So the second buck is what I would consider like the next step in the journey for me. This deer was in 2018, and like I said, I killed this one on 6 acres. This one was on 800 acres. It was still an urban area, but it was really the first time that I spent a ton of time trying to dissect a larger piece of property and having room to roam and move my stand around and run a bunch of cameras and try to plant little micro food plots and run feeders and things. So this was honestly just kind of proving to myself that what we learned on this small acreage stuff would work on larger acreage. And there's a couple dynamics to this story that make it memorable for me. One is the size of the property. 2, he's a super just unique buck, just really palmated through his beams. Got a bunch of trash. He was also like 140 pounds, which is wild. These deer were probably 10 miles apart from each other, and just like the difference in genetics there, where these bucks grow up to over 300 pounds and these max out around 150, 160. It's just crazy. And this one scored 186 inches. But I remember getting pictures of him the first time and just seeing like a small body and just a giant rack on his head, and it made it really hard to judge what he was. But leading up into this 2018 season, Lee, Kendall, and I all had a really, really tough 2017 season. I can't remember if none of us killed, or we ended up killing like one or two smaller bucks that weren't really our target bucks. We were also just kind of going through, I guess, a rough season of just life in general. All of us had something going on. And it wasn't until we really just kind of leaned into our faith, honestly, midway through the 2018 season, just like gave up control. We were just starting to have success on the YouTube stuff. We had killed a couple good bucks, and I think we just kind of got complacent, I guess, in a place where we felt like we were in control, and we definitely weren't. And God definitely proved that to us throughout the 2017 season. And then up until I killed this buck in like late December of 2018, the whole front half of the 2018 season was the same story, just like brutal. Deer would be showing up on camera, then you go in and he'd never show up, or just something crazy would happen and it just wouldn't work out. But I ended up killing him on the very edge of this 800 acres. And what it was like a creek funnel that had a bunch of privet in it. And by the time late season rolled around, all these deer were piling into this privet bottom because it was the only green that they had to eat. And that creek bottom eventually led up into a neighborhood and then onto a golf course, which was being kept fertilized and watered all year round. So there's green grass, and it's pretty much all they had to eat. And so all these deer were kind of funneling up through that creek ditch at night, and then coming back out in the morning, coming onto the big property to bed. And this is after I've run cameras all over this property. The deer were showing up on the entire 800 acres throughout the season. It just made it really difficult to pinpoint them down. But once that food got scarce, he just congregated into that creek bottom. And then I just sat like on a hole in the fence in that creek ditch for weeks. And I don't remember the exact day, but sometime mid to late December, he finally came strolling through one morning, and just put the close on that story. And what's crazy is Lee and Kendall and I had all been kind of like talking through the season of life and this hunting season in general, and we all had kind of come to the same place. Kendall was actually going through a lot harder stuff than we were. His mom was really sick. He had several other family members that were going through some stuff, and it actually brought our team really close together. But I killed this buck, and then it was like a snowball just started going. Lee killed Lefty, which is one of his biggest deer, 2 weeks later. And then Kendall killed the buck he had been hunting all season, literally the last hour of the last day of the season. And it's a big 6-pointer. I don't know if you guys have seen the video or not, but I believe it was either the day after that or 2 days later, his mom passed away. And so that was just kind of like, I guess it just kind of proved to us that, we're not in control, and when you give things to the Lord, good things happen. So try not to get emotional. All right. Last but not least, I bet the Realtree guys are wondering why I brought a mule deer into their studio. Again, kind of keeping with the theme of just like the progression of a hunter, at least for me. Started with the urban deer, moved on to a big woods deer or a bigger property deer. And then this was my first successful Western hunt, first adventure hunt. I had done one elk hunt before that. I've always loved the West. I've always been intrigued with the West, elk, mule deer, other Western species. I've always loved the mountains. And I've always felt like there's this barrier to entry for going out West and getting tags. I think a lot of people feel that way because it's a lot more difficult of a process than just going whitetail hunting in the Southeast. But I eventually started putting in for tags and ended up drawing this tag, public land. All the hunts that I've done out West so far have been draw tags, public land. And I've done it that way because I feel like I need to just cut my teeth doing it the hard way first, like DIY, drawing the tags. I have bought one landowner tag before, but again, just like I feel like I owe it to myself to try to go figure this stuff out myself, and it is difficult to do, and it's intimidating. But this hunt was in Utah, in the Wasatch Mountains, and it's 2 years ago. Actually went out there and scouted in August, and spent a couple days or a few days hiking around the mountains trying to figure out like where these deer live. Totally new environment for me hunting wise. These muleys get really, really high early season and throughout the summer. And so you literally have to hike straight up these mountains and camp up on top of the mountain to try to find these bucks. And especially like that early in the year, they're only on their feet for an hour, 2 hours at morning and dusk. And so you are hiking up there to get like a very short window of opportunity to spot these deer. So went up there on the scouting mission. Actually got into a pretty sketchy situation with with Thomas, our camera guy. It was one of those lessons learned moments. Had a leak in my water bladder in my bag. Ended up running out of water on the top. It was a place I'd never been to before, so I thought there was water close by, but there wasn't. And had to hike down in the middle of the night, like 5 miles straight down, basically a cliff to find water. Had a sketchy close encounter with a moose at like 5 yards, and I've never made the mistake of not bringing enough water again. But didn't see this deer or any of the other shooters that I ended up hunting that scouting trip. Found like a decent mature 6-pointer. Ended up going back there for opener, which was I think August 20th that year. Hiked up to the top, was camping on the very top of this mountain, like overlooking probably the most beautiful country you can possibly imagine. and ended up turning up a big group of bucks. And this was one of the top bucks in that group. Hunted them we were camped out on the top of the mountain for 5 days. Had to come back down to resupply and then go back up, and this is another lesson learned thing for me, hunting that steep terrain out there. Like, having a spotter across the ridge so they can see down below you is absolutely essential. So I got a buddy to come back up and spot for me, and on day 7 is when we were able to put a stalk on him and kill him. And to me, it was just like, this Western hunting stuff was something I'd always aspired to do, but it's always been really intimidating. And the country out there is so big. Like, it's one thing to draw the tag, but to go out there and try to figure this stuff out on your own on millions of acres of public land, it's a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort for low chances of success. But this hunt taught me that it is absolutely doable, and you can figure it out even if you're just some dude from Georgia, from the southeast somewhere, some flatlander. Like, if that's something that you want to do, apply for the tags. Like, just go on some hunts, and you'd be surprised that, whitetails and elk are not that much different than mule deer and elk are not that different from how whitetails act. And it's a learning curve that you can pick up pretty quick. So something I'm definitely looking forward to doing some more of, spending some more time in the mountains. And I would actually love to do a whitetail hunt out west at some point. But yeah, that's these 3 stories are probably the most memorable up to this point for me. I think if we do this video again in a couple years, I'll hopefully have another couple to tell stories on.